Welcome to the webinar, Customizing Monolithic Try-ins and Prototypes. The lecture will be presented by Jimmy Stegall, CDT, and we are going to begin shortly. And now I get to introduce Jimmy Stegall, CDT, a dental industry operational management and technical guru with 4 decades of experience. Jimmy Stegall is also a clinical educator, trainer, and published author. His impressive career includes 35 years growing and leading a major dental lab in the Southeast. And in the past 7 years, he has presented more than 460 educational and training events on implant and prosthetic restorations. Recently, the National Association of Dental Laboratories recognized Jimmy as their 2024 Excellence in Education Award winner, and his experience as expertise as a thought leader, educator, and mentor has helped to advance his cutting-edge digital techniques in dental practices and laboratories across North America. And with that, I get to say, take it away, Jimmy.
Thank you, Jessica. We'll get right to it. When we talk about customizing dentures today, there's lots of different tools, and we'll start with software tools. And denture design can be done in any of the major softwares, right? 3Shape, exocad, InLab, Blender for dental. Even if you're in expert mode in Mesh Mixer, you can do a denture. So software is just a tool. It's not a replacement for our skill sets, but it is a good tool. One of the key things that makes digital dentures look really good are the libraries that we use. The tooth libraries are critical for aesthetic success because, if we just scan a card of teeth and digitize those into a denture setup, it's not enough. If you see that image of those upper and lower anterior teeth, you can see that they're anatomized quite a bit. And it looks a little odd, but that's actually what's needed to give us the light reflection and refraction when we either print or mill those teeth. So smile libraries are really critical for success. And of course, materials have an impact. And we want to use materials that are strong first and aesthetic second. But if we can find materials that also help us in the overall look, so they add things like, ceramic particles, zirconia particles, things that will help the light refract or reflect a little better. And that also helps greatly with the end result of our aesthetic dentures. And these are probably the most common ones out there. There are 2 or 3 others, but these are the highest on my list for materials. But, we're here to talk about, how do we customize? And, there are tons of options now. There used to not be that many options. For the longest time, the GC Gradia was kind of my go-to because they were one of the few, other than Adextent, that had things in different shades of pink or purple. And it worked fine. But now we have things like Easy Gum and Palette and other systems out there that give us different consistencies, different textures, and tons of different shades that we can do all kind of creative stuff with. Now, in some systems, like the Bluestone Digital Print, for example, all these are added on after the denture is cured because that particular product cures at a very high temp, and that high temp would have a negative impact on these stains. Other systems that don't require a lot of high temp, we can actually do some of this before we actually cure the denture so that, we're curing at the same time, which may make it a little bit more durable. But, we've been dealing with surface stains forever, and it's not really a problem. But at the end of the day, I would like to put things on that are going to be the strongest and most durable. So let's talk about the techniques and workflows before I get into the hands-on demo to show you what we're doing. But we'll start back with the digital libraries. Every denture tooth manufacturer out there, for the most part, have digitized their tooth libraries. So that means that your favorite teeth that you've been using in traditional analog workflow are probably available digitally. So we don't have to necessarily learn new molds or new teeth we like. But unfortunately, those libraries aren't always anatomized further for digital. There's only a few that have done that. It takes a lot of extra work to scan the card of teeth of every mold, but then bring them up in a software somewhere and start anatomizing so that the light will act better and we'll get better reflection. And some libraries have even thin down the incisal 1/3 so that we get more translucency. Because remember, we're printing a monolithic resin, and to give it the gradiency and look we need, we have to count on these libraries to help us. So I think digital libraries are great. It's nice having them all, but I really would want mine anatomized. I would want that incisal 1/2 to be a little thinner. I would want to see, some of those deeper mamelons and horizontal striations. And a few have done it, and those are by far my favorite. So when we're picking a library and mold, it is not a lot different than we used to be. Oh yeah, the internet's going to give me a fit here. We're loading all the images. So when we get to a particular screen on a software, it says, okay, what library do you want? So you can see down at the bottom, there's a drop down where in this particular case, I've picked a digital Guineos mold or library. And then I can pick the specific mold within that library. So you can see that these are the tools that we move around. But you'll also notice things like we've always known when it comes to selecting denture teeth, and that is, what is the cuspid to cuspid width? What's the central width or the central length? Because those are important numbers, like when we're picking up a paper mold chart or a physical mold guide to kind of pick for our patient. But all that data is in the world, in the digital world as well. So you can see here, I'm looking at this particular mold of 020, and that's a Guineos mold. And the mold chart digitally is telling me that's 45.5 millimeters cuspid to cuspid width. And there's other information about the posteriors there as well. And all the different libraries will have different options for posteriors. This particular one is selecting a balanced. So it's a 10-degree teeth opposing a 33-degree tooth. Or I'm sorry, 10 degree over 10 degree. Oh no. I'm sorry, my images aren't loading. Give it just a second. So we'll press on here. So, the mold, as you can see in this image, I can see all that anatomy, but you see the little blue circle? That is a virtual wax tool. So I could actually do more if the mold that I've chosen doesn't have this or doesn't have enough of this. I can actually carve this into it. So I can give it that physical anatomy features that helps the light bounce. It's a lot of the same tricks that we've always used with layered ceramics. We're just doing it now in the virtual world. And so that's the teeth. But there's also things we can do with the gingiva to make it look better. And the software gives us some amazing tools to create that root eminence or that cervical roll or that margin definition or those embrasures. And some of the tools give it automatically. Others let us customize it even more. We can add stippling. We can add patients' names, all within the digital realm that allows us to say, hey, this is the way I want my teeth to look. 3Shape and exocad even give me the ability to say, you know what, I like this Guineos library, but I think the cuspids ought to be a little bit longer. Well, I can go within the settings of 3Shape and actually copy that library, give it another name like Jimmy's version of Guineos, and lengthen those cuspids and save it. So now I have a whole new library that I created based on, a pretty good one from a start. Another thing that helps us aesthetically, dentures, a lot of folks want to design the denture teeth all in one complete arch. I like to design mine in segments. If you can see that image on the left, you can see that I've connected the posteriors in a 4-unit block and the anteriors in a 6-unit block. That's my typical way. But because you've connected them, you have to be aware of the bridge connections, which can certainly distract from the aesthetics of the denture, right? If the bridge connections are too visible, then it literally looks like a bridge or a denture. So you want to make sure that they're covered and the settings are appropriate so that we get that natural look. And you see the comparison, the top and the bottom picture, how on one image I can really see it and it kind of make my tissue back up a little bit. But in the bottom one, we've got it covered nicely because we basically made it smaller. And I've always said that in these high strength materials we're using and the bond strengths we're getting of tooth to base, I don't need a super strong bridge joint in a denture tooth segment because it's bonded so well, it's not coming out. And this will save me from having to physically take a separating disc and cut those back so that they're covered well. And it's just a software tool that we set, in 3Shape, it's 3 settings, facial, lingual, and center. And I set them to those numbers, and one click, I've got the coverage that I need for the aesthetics of the connectors. Software tools give us all these variables for how we want our gingiva to look, again, which really, applies to the aesthetics of a denture. If it's flat and mirror-like finish, it really looks like a denture. So we want to give it anatomy, and how much depends on the age of the patient. But the tools are there to make this easy for us. So if you see, this is where looking at 3Shape again, there's a gingival aesthetics section that has 3 presets. So I call them mild, moderate, aggressive. And then the 4th preset is a custom setting where I can, again, create up to 10 of my own custom presets of how I like the gingiva. And that may be associated to a doctor's preference or a style of denture that we might want to create. And it allows us to preset this thing. So all I have to do is click one button to get the gingiva that I want. And you can see all the different variables that we're changing with those presets. Papilla length and width, root eminence, height and thickness or width, gingival margin, the roll, right? And then how we want the edge of that margin or that gingival roll to fit against the tooth. So I love this aspect of being able to go in and set up these wax templates to say, maybe just I've got one specific prosthodontist that likes their wax up to be fully anatomized, and they like a lot of embrasure space, or a long narrow papilla, or a heavy root eminence with a heavy cervical roll. I can go preset that with all these settings, and then as I'm designing that denture, the base setting or the mild setting, you can see that the first button is circle blue, and so that is a very mild, not a lot of anatomy, and that certainly is applicable with some patients or some dentists. But I'm going to click it to the next one, right? And you can see I've switched to the moderate, and I've gotten a little bit more root eminence, a little bit more cervical roll showing. And I'll click one more and go to the aggressive, and I've got the most as far as the 3 presets go. And then I'll click to the 4th, which is one of my customs. And really, it didn't change much except papilla length and width is a little bit less than the aggressive. But, I've got 2 or 3 more in there that I've saved for particular uses. But again, this used to take us 15 or 20 minutes time physically moving the mouse and carving and shaping that wax virtually to get this kind of aesthetics. But now we can do it with the tools that are given to us. So once we have our wax up maybe pre-selected, we can still go back and tweak it, right? Maybe we want to show a little bit more gingival length or cover a little bit more up. We have these tools that make it so easy to grab that section and pull it up over the tooth, or shorten that papilla, narrow that papilla. And then finally we can do that final nuance. If folks like stippling, if you like stippling on your denture, there's a tool that we can say, hey, I'm gonna paint this area red, and this is where I want stippling to go, and then click apply, and the stippling is applied for us. And there are multiple options within the stippling of how deep or how spaced apart these dots might be. Again, I don't do a lot of stippling in dentures anymore, but certainly the tools make it handy if I want to do that. So when we get our dentures printed or milled, the decision after curing or before curing, in my case, do we want to polish it or glaze it? If I'm going to polish it, I'm going to cure it first and then polish it. But we have glazes today available that really make things easy. And they're different than what we've used to been using for denture glazes. In past, denture glaze has been what we call it a shellac almost. It's a surface glaze. It's painted on dentures after dentures are polished and finished, or after they're, maybe roughened up. But it's a surface. And we know that they are going to peel or crack or yellow in time. They may last 2 years or 5 years. It depends on the patient. But that's always been the nuance with denture glazes. The glazes that we're using today, we're painting on the denture base and the teeth before we're curing them. So these glazes actually soak into the surface a little bit, not much, but only maybe 10 or 15 microns. But that's better than just sitting on the surface, because once we cure it, it locks it in. And now we have a glaze like almost a ceramic type phenomenon of how this glaze is locked into this denture base. And this virtually eliminates polishing. So the denture that you're looking at has been glazed. That glaze was painted on those printed teeth and printed base before curing, and that's what it looked like right out of the curing of it. And so that's a very cool workflow that saves us a lot of time, and it looks really good. Now, some people think it looks too shiny, and if that's the case, then don't put it on there and polish it traditionally at the pumice bench. And that certainly still works with all these polymers, all these printed dentures. Polishing cassettes is a relatively new phenomenon. It's a different type of tray that we put in the printers that actually change the light refraction so that the parts come out with a little bit of shine to them. Works really well with night guards, kind of okay with dentures. It really depends on how much polish you like, but how cool is it that we can print something and it comes out of the printer, out of this special cassette, and it's pretty much already done. We don't have to worry about a glaze or anything else. I'm a fan of polishing, but I'm also a bigger fan of glazing. Polishing is where somebody that's really good with a rag wheel and pumice can do that without over polishing and taking away too much of the acrylic. We called it slicking, right? If you slick that gingiva into that tooth, it doesn't look as natural. And there are technicians that are magical at this, and I'm not one of those, but it's certainly an art that we all enjoy. But how easy is it to just take, I use these Wagner wheels a lot because they're kind of a hybrid between a rubber wheel and a Scotch-Brite wheel, but they smooth everything really well. So smooth it with that, clean the dust off, and then paint these glazes on. With the printed teeth, you really need these glazes for strength and stain resistance. The gingiva is optional. You can certainly polish the gingiva instead of glazing it, but I'm of the habit now where I just glaze everything. Again, because I paint this on before it's cured, so it's baked into the surface of both the tooth and the base. And that, virtually eliminates the pumice bench for me. And there are multiple products out there now. The one we've used for so long would be the Dentsply Sirona Lucitone Digital Fuse Total, Fuse 3 Total. And the new one from Rodin, the NF2 or the nitrogen-free glaze, also does the same thing. So this is just a short video, if it'll run, of me doing that. One of the cool things I like about the Rodin system is that you're able to use this glaze product to not only glaze the denture, but to actually bond the teeth in. So, you'll see me seating that segment, but because it's the glaze I'm going to be using anyway, I just spread the excess around, just cover the teeth and start covering the gingiva, not get all the segments bonded in. And I just go back and use a little bit more glaze to cover the spots I missed. Really cool workflow because, once you've done this, it goes in the auto flash cure unit. And when it comes out, you're totally done. There's not anything left to do. Yeah, the internet's going to fight me on the video, but you get the gist there, I think. So again, I'm a fan of the glaze because of the workflow and how easy. So, here's a picture somebody sent me of a printed denture, printed teeth, and the stain was showing up, in just a couple of months, and some pretty significant stain. And so, will they stain? Yeah. And of course, we don't want them staining in 2 months. But this is a problem. This is a problem in technique. This is an issue of how these teeth were not glazed properly. So the glazes are a little bit tricky in that when you paint them on, they start to evaporate almost immediately. So if you don't set the glaze with a little tack light or cure light as you go, they will start to evaporate out of that surface. And if there's a tech doing a bunch of dentures, I can see how that can easily happen. And I know this is not common, but we need to be aware of it and need to be aware of the technique sensitivity to make sure we get this glaze on properly. I'll tell you that there's been a lot of R&D work done. And the loose on digital print, for example, is the only fully validated FDA system on the market. And part of the validations that they did was, on the staining. And, I was with Dentsply for 7 years. So I had some, ability to peek behind the curtain a few times. And one of the chemists at the R&D department said, yeah, we did a test. We put dentures in 3 triple strength coffee for 88 hours. And yeah, it's a little bit stained, but nothing like the one you showed me here that was stained that bad in 2 months. So we know that if we do it right, we can certainly avoid the stain. So let's talk about, I guess the main reason that we're here, and that is, turning these tooth-colored prototypes or these tooth-colored tri-end dentures pink. And there's all kinds of ways to do that, guys, today. That's the beautiful thing. We have so many options. There are paint-on materials. There are apply with your fingers and shape them around materials. There's putty and jar materials that, just a lot of different pink items that we can use to characterize. And we can get as involved as we want to get. This video, if it'll run, is showing a kit from PacDent called the Palette Kit that has just tons of colors of stains, very intense. So we see if I can get some out and show you under the other camera. But you can see in my box here how many I have of all these different colors of these palettes. And they're not the only one. Harvest has them as well. And a company called IDS Dental has them. And, you just get out the colors you like, the pinks, the purples, the different degrees of pinks, and you start applying them where need to be to make them look good. And this is not something that I do a ton of, but for special cases, this is certainly a tool. There are technicians out there that are doing some magical things with this. I am probably the most okayest dental technician out there, but if I need to do this, I can do this. But let's see if this video runs. Can you kind of see how this looks? So, there's a dark pink going on first, and we're getting it down in the embrasures. And this comes from Dr. Wally Renee's group, Mod, down in Charleston. And then, one of the putty type things, and you place them on, you shape them up. You like curing as you're going, and a little bit more maybe root color to make the root eminence pop out a little bit more, and then we're gonna, even add some things to the teeth if we want to dress it up, little cervical staining, little incisal translucency, whatever, floats your boat about, make them as pretty. And again, there are a lot of people that are great at this. And with a little practice, it's pretty simple to do with all the cool things that we have. And, that was a monolithic printed denture a minute ago, and it looks pretty good now. So these are all the things that I've used in the past, whether it's the palette or, the minute stains from Taub, the GC, the Annex Dent, lots of different consistencies. One of my favorites today, though, is the Harvest Easy Gum system because of the Easy Gum sticks or strips, they call it. It's very, very cool. The strips come in 6 shades and a couple of opacities. And it literally is that. It is a strip of pink that you just can apply with your fingers. What I'm about to do here when I do the hands-on portion. And again, like the prototypes on the right, you can get as involved as you like, right? Like that video just showed, some dark, some purples, some, tooth-colored, root-colored eminences, even some, incisal things on the teeth. Or you can get as easy gum strips want to be and just put some pink around the 6 anteriors for the tri-end denture so the patient can get an idea, that it's not going to be just a tooth-colored denture. That's kind of the problem we have when we do a printed tri-end of a monolithic printed denture, is that the patient really struggles with the aesthetics at times. Well, this is some images from my friend Shauna. She's a technician. She's now on staff at Harvest, but I want you to watch, how she's doing it. This is an adhesive or a bonding agent that we put on first, and then she starts to do her magic with all the different degrees of pinks and the purples, and then she pulls an easy strip in the shade she wants and starts applying that, and then taking certain instruments that are designed to use with this, start peeling away the excess, carving and shaping, forming up around the root eminences. And again, tools, you'll see me use these in just a second, just sculpting around the necks of the teeth, shaping up those root eminences. And we can come back and add a little bit more stain on the surface of this easy gum strip. But the whole goal here is to make this thing look good. And and Shauna does an awesome job, and you ought to pick up her videos on the Harvest website. But Easy Gum to me is that it's easy because they've worked out a lot of the colors and details. This is more in my world. The monolithic prototypes. I'm a big fan of these because to me it's all about what data we learn from this thing is so much better than a wax try-in. But I get it, patients struggle, and I hear it. I've heard it from patients a lot. Is that what my denture is going to look like? So, more and more we're doing things like, let's take this thing and make it a little pink for the patient. And to me, the Easy Gum strip is the easiest way to do this. And I'm a big fan of the easy part of the Easy Gum. So it's literally pick the strip and apply it with your fingers. And your fingers are the best tool with the Easy Gum at first. And then towards the end, I'll start using some of these other instruments to, carve and shape and sculpt, and get it positioned around as it should be. And then light cure it, and you're done. And I can literally do this in 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most. And all I did is use the Easy Gum strip. And again, we can make this nicer or more aesthetic or more, artistic if we want to start adding some of those modifiers in. And the Harvest system gives us lots of options, as does the Pack Dent system and the IDS system, and all of them out there. And these are some dentures from my friends and some that I've done that you can see. It's not only for the prototypes, sometimes we take the final pink denture and have to give it more characterizations. High-end patient, maybe the dark reddish pink is not dark reddish pink enough. We need more ethnic colors. And, that's kind of how we use these things. So I'll open it up to questions now, and I'll switch over to, I'll close the presentation in a second so that we have the full image of the desktop so you can see me do a couple of these things. So implant prototypes and try-in dentures. It's what I use this for more than anything else. I occasionally do it on the pink, but you can see my palette here that I've gotten some of the colors out that I may want to use. And I'll show you the difference. I'm not sure if this camera will pick up, but you can see that I've already cut back these dentures a little bit. And you can see one is a matte finish and one is shiny. And the reason that one is shiny is because I've already painted the bonding agent on that denture ahead of time. So there's a bonding agent that comes with each of the systems, and you want to use that. This one happens to be the Harvest one, but I like the Harvest one because it works on everything. I can paint this on printed products, milled PMMA. I can even paint it on zirconia, and the Easy Gum and all the stains will stick to it really well. But the same is true for the other systems, but some of them have a bonding agent for zirconia and a bonding agent for PMMA. But once that's set and it's basically painted on, give it about 10 seconds with the light and then let it set for about 5 minutes. Then you're ready to start applying your colors. So, what you saw in the video is kind of like the way most folks do it, right? We're going to take, an assortment of brushes, and, we're going to pick out, what stains that we want to add in unique areas. So it might be a purple, along a border, maybe tease down into the embrasure. Then we'll top that off with a more intense pink or blend it. If I don't want it to blend like that, I would take my curing light and set that before I'd add it. But you get that idea. My curing light's charged up. Yep. And I just set it. I'm going to put this thing in a curing unit, and just about any curing unit will cure all these things. Um, Again, it can be painted on with different materials, but the Easy Gum makes it so easy that what most of us typically do is if we want to characterize like this, we'll do that. We'll add that pink and that purple up near the border in the embrasures, and then it's time to pull, one of the Easy Gum strips out. I love this stuff. This is really, one of the best things to ever hit the market, and it's just pretty awesome because you're about to see how truly easy it is, and it's probably wouldn't use a whole strip on this case, but we can, and probably can cover the whole thing with one strip. Some dentures, it might take a strip and a half, but if we're covering the whole thing and it's a tall denture, but one of the things I love about this is that it really adapts to the anatomy underneath just by, the finger action. I've said it all along. I'll use some things here in a second, but you can save this excess and use it in different places later, other cases. But what I'm going to do is just make sure that I'm fully engaged in the design of the root eminence and down into the embrasures and certainly up into the papillas. Once I have it pressed in pretty good, and if you notice, I'm not sure the camera's picking up on this, but the harder that you push, the more the underlying denture starts to show through. So it's really not hard to make it look good simply by pressing hard on that cuspid eminence. And you can see that now that root's starting to show through simply because I've made the Easy Gum thinner in that one area. I love that aspect of it. Now, I found these little silicone tipped instruments on Amazon. They are used by sculptors, but it's just a soft silicone, and they really work well for pushing my gingiva down to where it should be, but leaving the papillas where they should be for the most part. But I'll just push them back to the normal gingival margin. I go in a lot of dental offices training staff to do this, and the staff absolutely love this. This is really a way to use their artistic talents to make your try-ins look better. But I know that labs are now doing this pretty routinely. If a doctor asks that, hey, the printed prototype's great, it fits great, love the way I'm getting all this good data for bite and things, but can you make them prettier? The patient just really struggle with them not being pink. And so your lab guy can do this in just a couple of minutes. Again, this is my favorite part of the name. It's called Easy Gum for a reason, and this is literally that easy. Now, the Easy Gum also comes with this little tool that I could take it and carve that excess away if I still have too much there. So I'd spend a little time on this, really getting that gingival margin to look good, because remember I said I did cut these back a little, or when I designed them with a cut back so that I knew I was going to be doing this. If I wanted to add some texture, I would take something like this stippling brush. It's actually just a stencil brush from Hobby Lobby, and I would just give it some light taps to give it a little surface texture so that it's not so smooth, or smooth out the bumps a little bit. I could come back and say, hey, I want to add a little bit more color in a couple of these embrasures, or maybe create some vein-like effects, and I could paint that on the surface. And when I'm done, I'm going to take one of the glazes. Just a couple of drops, doesn't take much. I'm going to get my glaze brush, and I'm going to put a glaze over this. I'm going to set that with my light for a few seconds. And then I'm going to take it over to the cure box. I typically use an auto flash or the loose tone digital print cure box. And it 10 minutes max. Most of that will probably cure in 5 minutes. But that's as complicated as I want to get. Now, you saw what Shauna does. It's beautiful, and that's great. Me, typically, I'm working on a denture that needs to be pink. And so, after I get the bonding agent on the denture, I'm pulling out the Easy Gum strip. Going directly to the denture. Just to make it pink. Again, most of the heavy lifting I'm going to do with my fingers. I'm going to press a little harder on the root eminences, especially the cuspid, because I want to see it coming through. This pill is good.
It's kind of funny. You kept saying easy gum, and
Easy.
I'm watching it, and it is easy gum.
It is Easy Gum. That's what it is. It's pink putty that is pretty darn easy to shape and form and mold around the teeth, and give us that just that little extra pop that a trying denture might need. And because this thing may only be in the mouth a few minutes or a few days, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a lot easier conversation with the patient if it kind of looks like a denture. And I get it. But this is a denture that the patient could take home now and wear for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. It's that strong. And that's so much better than a wax try-in, in my opinion. So I think I've gotten the point across pretty well that you're going to manipulate and shape this. I'm going to put a glaze on it. I'm going to put it in the curing oven, and boom, I have a pink denture from a Monolithic. And the same thing with my prototypes. Do it the same way. That's how we do it, guys. There's not a lot of sorcery behind that. But if you have any more questions, you can reach out to me. My website is here to servedental.com, and I can point you in the right direction. And good luck with your dentures.